John Stuart Mill Utilitarianism, maximizing happiness versus justice and rights. Imagine a world where every decision, every law, and every action is judged by one simple question. Does it create the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people? It sounds beautiful, doesn't it? A moral system built on maximizing human well-being, where kindness, fairness, and progress all serve one ultimate goal: happiness. But what happens when that same principle justifies harm to a few for the sake of many? What if the pursuit of happiness comes into conflict with justice or individual rights? This is the dilemma at the heart of John Stuart Mill's utilitarianism, one of the most influential and controversial moral theories in philosophy. In this exploration, we'll uncover Mill's quest to balance pleasure and principle, understand how he refined Bentham's ideas, and examine why the question of happiness versus justice remains as relevant today as it was in the 19th century. The foundation of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism begins with a simple yet powerful idea. Actions are right if they promote happiness, and wrong if they produce the opposite of happiness. For Mill, happiness meant pleasure and the absence of pain. Not just physical comfort, but intellectual and emotional satisfaction as well. He inherited this principle from Jeremy Bentham, who famously declared, "Nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure." But while Bentham saw all pleasures as equal, Mill disagreed. He believed that human beings are capable of higher pleasures, those of the mind, imagination, and moral feeling, which are superior to mere physical satisfaction. As Mill wrote, "It is better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied." This distinction between higher and lower pleasures marked a major evolution in utilitarian thought. It recognized that not all happiness is created equal, that the joy of understanding, of love, of beauty, or of moral integrity is worth more than mere amusement or indulgence. The greatest happiness principle. At the core of Mill's philosophy lies the greatest happiness principle, the idea that morality is about maximizing overall happiness for everyone affected by an action. The moral value of any decision, therefore, depends on its consequences. If a policy benefits the majority, it is morally good. If it causes more pain than pleasure, it is bad. This principle provided a practical way to evaluate laws, institutions, and individual choices. For instance, a government's duty, according to utilitarianism, is to enact policies that promote the welfare of its people. Likewise, individuals are encouraged to act not just for personal gain, but for the collective happiness of society. Yet, the principle also raises complex questions. Who decides what counts as happiness? How do we weigh one person's pleasure against another's suffering? These questions would push Mill to refine utilitarianism beyond Bentham's simple arithmetic of pleasure. Higher and lower pleasures. Mill observed that human beings have faculties beyond mere sensation: intellect, imagination, and conscience. These faculties make us capable of experiencing higher pleasures, which are qualitatively better than physical ones. Reading a great book, creating art, or engaging in moral reflection. These experiences enrich the human spirit in ways that eating or resting cannot. Mill argued that people who have experienced both types of pleasure would always choose the higher ones, even if they come with greater effort or pain. This view gave utilitarianism a moral depth it had previously lacked. It wasn't about maximizing raw pleasure, but about cultivating the kinds of happiness that make us fully human. However, this refinement also introduced a tension. If quality matters more than quantity, how do we measure happiness at all? Utility and justice. Perhaps the biggest challenge to utilitarianism is justice. What if maximizing happiness for the majority requires violating the rights of a few? Would it be moral to sacrifice one innocent person if it prevents suffering for many others? Mill recognized this danger. Critics accused utilitarianism of being a philosophy for pigs, or a system that could justify cruelty if it benefited the majority. To counter this, Mill argued that justice itself is rooted in utility, that respect for individual rights ultimately promotes greater happiness in the long run. For example, a society that protects its citizens' rights will foster trust, stability, and cooperation, leading to greater collective well-being. In this way, justice and utility are not enemies, but partners. Mill believed that a society based on fairness, equality, and respect for individuals is the most effective means of achieving lasting happiness, individual liberty, and moral progress. Mill's utilitarianism is closely linked to his defense of individual freedom, famously expressed in his book on liberty. He argued that society must allow people to think, speak, and act freely, as long as they do not harm others. Why? Because individual liberty is essential to moral and intellectual progress. When people are free to explore ideas, pursue goals, and learn from mistakes, humanity as a whole becomes wiser and happier. For Mill, freedom wasn't just a political value, it was a utilitarian necessity. A society that suppresses individuality stifles creativity, innovation, and truth, leading to stagnation and unhappiness. Thus, personal liberty and utilitarian ethics go hand in hand. Protecting freedom serves the ultimate goal of maximizing happiness. The limits and criticisms of utilitarianism. Despite its appeal, utilitarianism faces several powerful objections. Critics argue that it can justify immoral actions if they increase overall happiness. For example, if lying or harming one person leads to a better outcome for many, does that make it right? Moreover, the theory demands that we weigh and compare everyone's happiness, something nearly impossible in practice. Whose pleasure counts more? How can we measure happiness across different lives, cultures, or experiences? Others claim that utilitarianism overlooks moral integrity. A person acting purely to maximize happiness might lose sight of personal values, promises, or duties. Philosopher Bernard Williams later argued that utilitarianism can alienate individuals from their own moral convictions. Still, Mill's version of the theory remains powerful, precisely because it tries to balance these tensions, valuing happiness without abandoning morality. Utilitarianism in the modern world. Today, utilitarian thinking shapes public policy, economics, and even technology. Governments use cost-benefit analyses, a modern form of utilitarian reasoning, to decide laws, healthcare priorities, or environmental regulations. Ethical debates about artificial intelligence, data privacy, and global justice often hinge on utilitarian principles. What creates the most benefit for the most people? But Mill's caution remains relevant. The pursuit of happiness must never ignore justice or individual dignity. A purely numerical approach to morality risks dehumanizing people into statistics. True utility for Mill includes compassion, respect, and fairness, the higher dimensions of happiness. Mill's legacy, balancing head and heart. Mill's genius was not in rejecting emotion for logic, but in uniting them. He believed reason must guide our moral choices, but empathy must inspire them. The goal of ethics is not cold calculation, but human flourishing, a balance between rational principles and emotional understanding. His work reminds us that morality is not about abstract rules or blind duty. It is about enhancing life, making it richer, more meaningful, and more joyful. Utilitarianism, in its best form, challenges us to think beyond ourselves, to consider the impact of our choices on the world around us. So, imagine standing before every choice in life, big or small, and asking, will this action increase happiness and reduce suffering, not just for me, but for everyone it touches? That question is the essence of John Stuart Mill's philosophy. It is not a perfect formula, but a guiding light, one that invites both reflection and responsibility. Yet the question remains, how far are you willing to go for the greater good? Would you sacrifice comfort for justice, or happiness for principle? If this exploration into Mill's world of ethics and happiness sparked your thoughts, like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the philosophies that continue to shape how we live, choose, and care in the modern world.